Great. Hello and welcome to the podcast. John, how are you? Good to see you again.
Yes, good, Dan. Thank you. Yeah, it's always nice to be back. And I don't know, every time we see each other, it feels like so much goes on,
Yeah.
in the world. It's just like accelerated. And every time it's just like, how do we keep up? So that's always something to think about. And we've been getting a lot of great comments, more people subscribing to our LinkedIn.
Definitely.
And we have, you had some people reach out. Oh, we would like to be on the podcast. So now we have people saying, "Hey, I think you should talk to me," which is always interesting. I don't think we're always as excited as on everybody, are we, Dan? Because some
Well,
of the
I think now we're actually getting interesting people contacting. Not, I mean, no disrespect to. There's a lot of podcast agencies out there who are just they want to get their guests on, and they're just
yes,
spamming every single podcast, and it's got no relevance to what we're doing, and they obviously haven't listened
exactly.
to it.
Yeah,
Which is,
yeah.
I mean, whatever. It's always I don't mind that, but we're actually getting people who are actually potentially good guests contacting us now, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And today is another amazing guest. So I had the opportunity of going to a conference on maker spaces and STEAM and STEM, and there were different speakers. And one of the speakers was from CERN, which is we're going to find out about, is Jeff Wiener, our guest. And what was so interesting was how he really focused on the challenges of gender and science and women in science, and then talked a lot about the programs that CERN is doing to really promote teachers to think about science and STEM. So, Dan, today we're going to kind of delve in that world with Jeff. So, Jeff, first of all, warm welcome. And I would love you maybe to straight away tell our audience what is CERN? Why should we know about it?
Brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation now. CERN. CERN, some people might know us. We are the world's largest laboratory for particle physics, which says a lot. But we are most famous for the Large Hadron Collider, of course. So we have the largest particle accelerator in the world, which is one of our many accelerators, actually. We are not only running the LHC, we have plenty of them all connected to each other. And so we at CERN, we can create the highest energies possible by colliding particles and then studying what happens in this very, very short moments of time when those particles collide. And of course, we are an international organization. So this is not a national lab. This is really a worldwide global effort where we bring together scientists and engineers from all around the world. And well, to be honest, I've been now here at CERN for more than 12 years, and every day I'm still so happy that I'm part of this organization because it never gets boring.
I can imagine. And you are partly in France and partly in Switzerland. And I know that from what I understand, the population of employees is hugely varied from different cultures, women, men, and just like really quite a rich mix of people.
You're absolutely right. It's as international as it gets. Our laboratory, I mean, our laboratory is scattered all over the place. We have really several sites, but the main site is located exactly on the border in between France and Switzerland. So over lunchtime, we can cross the border by foot if we want to. And indeed, we have certain members of personnel who are based at CERN permanently. We are talking about some 4,000 to 5,000 people, that is. But then we have another, well, let's say 15,000 people all around the world, so-called users, who are researchers, scientists, engineers, who come to CERN for some days, some weeks, some months to either run or prepare experiments. And of course, there's a big going in and out, and that, of course, makes the whole organization a very, very diverse workplace.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Now, tell us a bit about your program because even though you are a physicist by trade, you actually are working with teachers and educators. So CERN actually has invested a lot of time and money into education. Tell us a bit about what this program is that you're involved with and that you actually are the director of.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I would say it's even probably my most favorite topic to talk about because, yes, at CERN we have a lot of people. And most of them will tell you that they have an amazing job or even the best job at CERN, but they're all lying, because I by far have the best job at CERN. I'm in charge of all teacher programs at CERN, which means every year we host about 1,000 high school teachers from all around the world who come to CERN for dedicated teacher programs. So we run, for example, national teacher programs where a group of teachers from one country or from one language group, let's say, come to CERN for a week. And then our experts, our scientists here at CERN, they volunteer their time to give lectures, show them around on site. So we do visits, we have workshops. So the teachers come here for a week and they really get to experience this beautiful lab, and they get an update on what's going on right now in the field of particle physics. And then, of course, they return home after 1 week, and then they have to work through everything we throw at them, and then they have to figure out how best to use it in their classroom. And of course, so that means I by far have the best job at CERN, because every week, every Sunday, I get to welcome a group of teachers. And of course, those teachers, for them coming to CERN, this is like going to Hogwarts. It's the Hogwarts of science. So they are already excited, and then I get to welcome them. So every week I'm showered with love and luck, and I'm very happy about that. And then at the end of the week, we hand out certificates and a goodie bag. So I also see them leaving CERN happy and smiling. So yeah, I'm very, very happy with the job. And of course, it's not just that I enjoy it. We really see the numbers of applications. We see the feedback we generate. Teachers who come to CERN, they really leave CERN happy and smiling. And we see the impact that those teachers then make on the next generation of scientists, on their students over the coming years.
So what have you noticed? You've been there 12 years. You have thousands of teachers that come through. What are some patterns that you're observing about science? Because, if we think of the world today with artificial intelligence, climate issues, the science is definitely something that's really, really important. And often, I think for a lot of kids, sometimes, not all of them, but sometimes science is a tough one to dig into, because physics and chemistry and biology can be quite challenging, and you need some math. So what has kind of been the changes that you've observed amongst the teachers that you're hosting regarding their engagement and their kind of perspective on science?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, you're absolutely right in pointing out science in general, and especially physics here. They are not the top favorites when we look at interest studies that are run all over the world. We have plenty of interest studies where we show that students don't necessarily enjoy or like science that much as we want them to do. And so, of course, that is an ongoing challenge that our teachers have faced or keep facing throughout the years. We, however, see that the value of science, and of course, we are facing tremendous challenges, and of course, climate change being number one. But now, of course, also we are experiencing yet another paradigm shifting with the upcoming developments in AI, and of course, we really see that there's a lot of change going on. And so when you ask me about what we see with our teachers, I really have to be honest. We have quite some self-selected groups of teachers. So the teachers who come to us, they apply, they want to come here. So we rarely get to see a teacher, if they even exist, to say, well, physics. that doesn't really happen to us. So within this very positive selection of teachers who we welcome at CERN, we do see, especially at the moment, an ongoing debate is how to best use, let's say, AI tools or machine learning tools in the classroom, how best to make students aware of the risks, but also the benefits of AI. So this is certainly one topic. But of course, the overarching discussion is always, how can we inform the next generation of scientists, but also the next generation of members of society? Because let's face it, only a few of our students in the classroom will go into science, but all of them will become members of society. So what kind of scientific background can we give them so that they leave their school education with at least not just some ideas, but also a good feeling about the values of science? And I think this is a huge, tremendous challenge that all teachers around the world are facing, how to prepare the next generation for all the challenges that lie ahead. So I think this is an ongoing discussion that we see with all teachers from essentially every country, since all our teachers come from all around the world.
So it's kind of what can we do to change the mindset? In other words, the perception of what science is and what it can do. You feel that maybe there is not a strong enough baseline amongst the students that we're educating?
Mm, Well, I think if you look a little bit more on the school level, I think one huge challenge that every teacher faces, no matter the subject they teach, is they have a very limited amount of time for whatever they want to do in the classroom. The curriculum is packed. There's no one country, no one curriculum where people say, "Oh yeah, I have plenty of time." It's always stressful to get everything in there and to do it in a meaningful way. Now, of course, in a field that is constantly evolving, curriculum changes don't necessarily keep up with the pace of our field of research. So if we look, for example, in particle physics, we have seen tremendous progress throughout the year, which is also the reason why we run our teacher programs, just because professional development programs in the countries and curricular development, they don't catch up with what we do at CERN in other laboratories. And so that's why the teachers come to us and then they get a crash course. Within 1 week, we really tell them what's going on right now. Never do we ever tell them, this is what you have to teach them, because we would never be able to say how to teach. After all, teaching is a very personal endeavor, but we give them the tools or ideas for them to figure out how best to use it in their classroom with all the given constraints the teachers are facing. And so I think with navigating this challenging field, where on the one hand you're constrained by time, you're constrained by normative settings such as the curriculum, but then also students who might need some convincing that this relatively abstract or sometimes even difficult to understand topic carries a lot of meaning and value for them. That, I think, is a tremendous challenge.
Are you, as an organization, challenged by finding scientists? Is there a shortage?
Yes and no. No, from the point of view that at CERN, we are really the worldwide leading laboratory in particle physics, which means whenever we open a position, we have plenty, if not even too many applicants, just because we are very famous and very known. So we are a victim of our own success, if you want. However, if we look at the talent pipeline, it's not as diverse as we would love it to see. And of course, you already mentioned early on that gender in science especially is a really, really important topic to look at. We at CERN, we are only the receiving line. The problem starts way, way earlier. But we do see, of course, if we open one position for a physicist, that we get way more applications from male physicists as opposed to female physicists. And of course, if you get hundreds of applications and you have to find one person, and if already the pipeline is very, not very well balanced, then chances are that our percentage of female scientists at CERN will not increase as much as we would love to see it. And I should maybe give some information. Of course, CERN, we are celebrating our 70th anniversary this year. So we were founded in the year 1954. And when we were started, so throughout the years, it was predominantly male-dominated, the field of physics. And it only started in in some recent decades that progress has been made, but we are still looking at, let's say, around about 20% of female scientists at CERN, which is by far not good enough. And so we launched at CERN as an organization an initiative that is called 25 by 25, which means we are targeting that by the year 25, we want to have at least 25% female staff, which is still not even close to being good enough, but it's significantly better than what we've seen in the past. And so this is something where we as an organization really make very conscious and very active decisions in our hiring policies. Having said that, however, we are still focusing on excellence first, of course, and only then do we look at other metrics such as nationality, gender, and other diversity measures.
So I'm just wondering, on that issue, are you finding that your pool is not as diverse? So there's definitely the gender issue. Do you find diversity is also a challenge in science?
Well, I think in this way, I would not sign up to the statement, but having proper diverse representation in science, I think, is a big challenge, because we know that diversity significantly increases productivity. If we look at various consulting companies who have shown that for companies who pay, we are a non-profit organization, so for us it's more the output of research, and so we know more diverse teams lead to a more productive output. And so this is certainly something where we as an international organization, we are by definition very diverse. We have 34 member and associate member states, and then some users from essentially all around the world. So we are very diverse. But of course, when it comes to filling positions and hiring, you have to select one. And if you select one, you always have to make a decision. And so those decisions can lead over time that you have some nationality clusters or some gender clusters in certain teams, which we know are not beneficial for the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you talked about girls and the gender gap, and that actually it starts very early on. By the time people are coming to you, there's already been that kind of culling, or where there have not been, especially we're talking about particle physics and physics. And you, I know in your presentation, you talked a lot about the research and what's out there. Talk to us a bit more. What are you observing as in your role? You know, are you seeing a change, or what are some of the points where you think things break down and we don't have that gender diversity?
All right. Okay. So I will try to be concise, but of course this is a huge topic. So I will
Yeah.
see how far I can cover it. So first of all, there is the term of the so-called leaky pipeline, where we know that we see studies have shown very young students, they come to the classroom and they are fundamentally curious, and we don't see any differences. They are curious and they are happy to learn. And we see that also reported back from especially science teachers when they teach to very young learners. You can really, really fascinate them and engage with them very easily. And only over time do you see that students get, let's say, more and more frustrated, or at least disengaged from scientific subjects. So this is one thing that we see. And the history of, let's say, interest type research over the the last 40 years has originally focused really on the gender difference. So they really, in the research, defined, okay, we have males and females, and we see more interest among male students as opposed to female students. This, I have to say, I'm very happy to see, has now really changed. There's a big paradigm shifting going on. Also, I can say that within our group, we have a huge physics education research group at CERN, and we have various PhD students and postdoc students. And there's one student who recently finished her PhD. She did an interest study where she could show that those interest types no longer correspond to just boys and girls, but that there are just certain types of students that us teachers we see in the classroom. And so the very easy categorization is that you have interest group number one. These are the nerds, or let's say in a positive sense, of course. These are those who are very curious and interested, and you can throw at them whatever you want and they will love it. So this is interest group number one, and every teacher who teaches science will know some of those students. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the other interest group. They are not really interested. It's a hard effort to really get them engaged. And I think every teacher knows some of those students as well. And then you have the ones in the middle who are not they're in the middle. So you can give them something, but they might not go to the really advanced stuff. And so the new classification doesn't really distinguish between boys and girls. We rather use those interest types, and within the nerd group, you can have boys and girls. Within the science opposition, let's say, you can have boys and girls, and in the middle as well. And so I think this is something that educators really should look at when they prepare their their teaching in the classroom, because it's very easy to negatively support stereotyping. And I think and that's the reason why I'm a little bit hesitant to just give a clear-cut answer, because it's not just the education system, it's also society. We see it in society. There's a certain stereotyping going on. We know families, the upbringing of kids has a huge influence and huge impact on students. And if from the very beginning we have seen studies, boys are being told, you're no problem, you can just do that. Whereas girls are told, oh, in science, yeah, you have to study very hard because this is not for you, which unfortunately still is ongoing. Then, of course, the education system can only change so much. And so this is something where I personally, from what I've seen in the recent research when it comes to gender identity and especially gender interest in the field of science, it's really no longer boys can do that, girls we have to look at. It's really about who is interested, we have to focus on them, and who is really not interested, we really have to focus on them.
It's interesting. I'm curious because, you know, I mean, I studied engineering at university, and when I studied engineering, it was, I mean, maybe there was, let's say there was maybe 150 people in my year, and I think there were two girls in our year, maybe three. So it was really underrepresented. But my understanding is, at least in the UK, the percentage of women in STEM subject universities is increasing year on year. And interestingly, this is a whole different topic, which we probably can't, not enough time to get into, but the percentage of male students is actually going down across university. Like women in the UK are 35% more likely to go to university than men. So it's interesting that they're actually dropping. The percentage of men of UK going to university is just dropping and dropping, which I'd love to know. I have no idea why that is, you know, but it's interesting. But is the percentage of women in STEM going up in terms of, obviously there's people that study and then there's people who get a job in it. Obviously that's another disconnect, but is it increasing like worldwide, like it is in the UK?
It's not worldwide. Yeah, thank you very much for your comment, because it's exactly what makes it so difficult. We see it in certain countries, and especially you mentioned the UK, where the IOP, the Institute of Physics, has done tremendous work when it comes to closing the gender gap. Really amazing work, and I can really encourage everyone, and I think we can put it in the show notes for afterwards. There are some tremendous material from the IOP who then link to other institutes. And so there we really see that the gender gap is closing. We also see, for example, in Italy, that they never or rarely had any of those problems. Italy was almost always 50-50. And so there's a certain national element to it, or the national education system and the upbringing. But we see it in other countries. And here, especially then when we talk about the level of income for teachers, for example. So in countries where teachers are not well paid, we see that historically it is considered to be a job for women. Not just because, you know, people say women are not allowed to earn more, but it used to be, or it tended to be a job that was not really attractive to men who wanted to do something else. So we see that, for example, in some countries, when we have teacher programs from countries from the Eastern Europe, for example, we receive groups of teachers. Almost all of them are women, just because most of the science teachers in Eastern European countries are women. The opposite is true for Nordic countries, for example, where it's very well balanced. So that's what makes the whole thing a little bit more tricky. Having said all of that, in science, we do see, generally speaking, an increased interest in science, and also increased numbers of students signing up to study it. In some countries, we see the gender gap closing. In some of them, they stay well balanced. We don't really see any countries, or at least I'm not aware of countries, where the gender gap is really increasing. So that is at least stable. Is good news here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a positive. And I think, historically, and I think maybe well, interesting fact, Dan, you had 3 women and 147 men. In my program, I taught I went and studied at graduate school, early childhood, early primary. There were 90 women and 2 of us. So,
yeah.
it just, most men would not go into early childhood education.
Yeah, I mean, just give you another number. I did a Masters of Education fairly recently, and there was a small group of 30 of us, and there was two men in that group.
Interesting.
So,
yeah. It's interesting how those patterns occur and everything. So, Jeff, I would say that in your program, when the teachers come, you're not talking about this gender issue, because you're really focusing. You got a week. You're talking about the particle physics. What's the latest? You're not really talking about philosophy or approach to teaching science, or are you?
To some extent, yes. So obviously, when teachers come to us, they of course get to experience lectures and visits, and of course, this we would really qualify as input on their content knowledge. However, that alone would not make for a good teacher training. That is not enough. So we also host workshops where we really at CERN we have a brand new education and outreach center called Science Gateway, where we have brand new beautiful education labs which were designed for students, of course, and everyone can come to CERN and visit us, but we always reserve one slot for our teachers every week so that we bring them there and really have them experience workshops where they, for example, build their own particle detector. It's a very, very easy, low-cost particle detector where they can observe particles in their classroom. Because we know from research, if you tell teachers, this is how you build the particle detector, only a small number of them will try it out. The moment you have them experience and have them build it on their own, a large percentage of them will try it out in the classroom. So for us, it's really a very important thing to have them experience our experimental settings. It's one of our main foci within our group. We want to make education as cheap as possible. So our PhD students and postdocs, they constantly develop experimental setups, especially in the field of particle physics. There's not much you can do, or at least for a few years ago that was true. Nowadays, there is more and more being developed, but some of it is very expensive. And so our team really is looking at making it as cheap as possible. And so, for example, just to mention one thing, there's an existing particle trap that one can buy. So it exists already for the classroom. You can buy it from commercial shops. Costs several $1,000s or euros, whatever currency you want to use. It's really, really expensive. And I really don't know of any school that can really afford buying more than one of them, if even at one. And so our team has developed a low-cost version that works beautifully, where all the material is online on our website, and teachers can just download everything, and then they have to invest in some electronics, and for about 30 euros or dollars, they can have a working particle trap in their classroom. And so this is really something that we, so, and of course, I would be happy to share all the links so that anyone who is listening now can immediately click on the link and download everything. Everything that we do at CERN is for free, and everything is open access. We are a huge proponent of the open access movement at CERN. This is where we come from. It's in our DNA. And maybe just to finish my answer, because you also mentioned about talking about the philosophy of science and also the gender issue or the gender situation. We, of course, make it a huge point at CERN with all our programs that what our teachers see really represents the organization. So when we have lecturers, guides, and people interacting with our group, we really try to have an as diverse pool of lecturers as possible, which means, of course, gender balance is clear anyway. This is something that I take very, very much pride in. But then we also try to have experience levels, different experience levels, very young, maybe PhD students, and people who are still working on a potentially Nobel Prize winning experiment. And then they drop the screwdriver, come to us for 2 hours, and then they go back. So all of that we really try to represent, so that teachers, when they come here, not only learn about the content knowledge and the pedagogical content knowledge, but that they can also bring back stories of science and real world examples, because some of our students, and especially in the age of, let's say, 15, 16, maybe even 14, when students really make a career or start making career decisions or trying to figure out what is my place in this world, what could I see myself doing? When we talk about seeing myself doing something, if our students Google physicist these days, they will find a lot of pictures that look very much like Albert Einstein, or some comic pictures of people with old white heads, white beard, maybe a lab coat. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth nowadays. And of course, if our teachers do not present our students with role models, because we know representation matters, students need to be able to see themselves doing this. They will not necessarily say, "Oh yeah, science, that's something for me. I just need a white beard and let's go." And this is one problem for all of our students, but especially for the girls in our classroom, because they exist. Female scientists, we have rock star scientists here at CERN. Of course, they exist, but they are not as well, presented or visible compared to all the many male role models. And so that's something that I really try to push through our programs to our teachers, that they can take role models, both male and female, and present it to the students, so that every one of the students can figure out, oh yeah, that's something I'm interested in, and maybe I check out the YouTube channel of this potential role model, or maybe I follow this scientist on Instagram or on Facebook or on Snapchat or whatever social media they like to do these days. And so, yeah, this is one of our way how our programs try to be, as complete as possible, acknowledging that we only have 1 week.
Yeah, exactly. But the fact of the role models, I think that's so important. And I love your analogy of looking on Google for a scientist and you got Albert Einstein. I mean, it's interesting that there's still not this cool factor associated with science, or like, wearing a muscle shirt or wearing a nice outfit. There is something about that. And I think what you're saying is so important is, if we can't provide these role models, it's going to be hard for kids to get their heads around some of the kind of narrow-minded views that are populating, general discourse. So I absolutely, that just sounds so important. And it's great to hear that you're focusing on that. And it's amazing you only have a week. It's a very busy week. Do these people sleep?
From time to time. But actually, not only do they get some time to sleep, we also make it a case that they have breaks in between, which might sound surprising to some people, but the breaks are what research tells us one of the most effective element in a teacher training program. It's not so much our input, it's not so much what we give them, it's more the time the teachers can spend reflecting on the program and talking to each other. It's really recommendations from colleagues, which makes the whole program really effective. And it's also the reason why for every teacher program we run, and this is another element why I by far have the best job at CERN. For every program at CERN, for every teacher program, we at the halfway point, we invite all the teachers and some of our lecturers to an official dinner in Geneva, because you have to allow them to socialize and to reflect on it. And of course, in Geneva, here the heart of Switzerland, the official dinner has to be a delicious cheese fondue. And since I told you at the beginning that we have a teacher program every week, you now see that I am the guy who eats 1 cheese fondue every week. My all-time record from the year 2017, it was were 47 cheese fondues in 1 year. So I really,
Oh, wow.
I think I made the case I have the best job at CERN.
I think so. And I'm wondering if that's a world record. You should double check with the Guinness Book of Records. I could not eat 47 cheese fondues. What about you, Dan? Oh, you're vegetarian. You're vegan.
No, I'm not. I'm not vegan. I'm vegetarian. So I
Okay.
eat fondue. I had a great one in St. Anton in Austria a month ago. Actually, it was really nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of fondue.
So, one thing that we've been not avoiding, but we talked very lightly at the beginning, is this whole topic of AI, because I'm wondering, in the context of CERN, you talked about that you're an open source. You really promote open source, and you're nonprofit, and you want your resources to be available to everybody. So Jeff put in the link his resources, and they're fantastic. So do go to the show notes, because there are a lot of free resources. It's amazing what CERN is, shares out. Are you then, and is the stance that you have regarding AI is to have open source AI, really promoting the idea? Because right now, most AI are run by billion-dollar companies, and there's a lot of talk about what does that mean for free thinking, open source access when you have companies that are driven, the fact is, by the bottom line and profits. Where does an organization like yourself stand in that? Are you creating your own large language model because you want it to be open source?
Well, very good question. So CERN is, as I mentioned, for us, open access is in the DNA. When we were founded, 1954 already, our founding fathers wrote down in the CERN charter that all our results have to be made publicly available. Back then, 1954, we haven't even invented the World Wide Web, which, as you probably know, was invented here at CERN. So nowadays, everyone says, yes, of course, it's open access. But back then, 1954, we really had to print every result and send it via post to all the different institutes. So that's really where we're coming from. So for us, it's really very natural. And I should also say, AI, of course, is a term that is being used for everything and nothing these days. At CERN, most of our scientists here at CERN, I think they prefer the term machine learning, which is, I think, more accurate to where we are coming from, because machine learning has been widely used at CERN already. After all, we, with our beautiful accelerators, we are colliding particles many times per second. When I say many times per second, I mean round about 1 billion collisions every second. They just happen when we run the LHC. And of course, no human being could ever track that or even analyze it. So for that, we have developed our own algorithms who really go into the data, and they really track what happens in each collision, what kind of particles came out, where is the track, which track corresponds to which particle. So long story short, machine learning, and of course to some extent we can now also call it AI, has been used at CERN for a long time. So we of course develop our own models. I would not necessarily call them large language models. They are more like, very smart machines. And everything we've developed, I invite everyone to check it out. We have published everything. It's all on our website, cern.ch. Feel free to investigate. But we are not necessarily producing, let's say, the next ChatGPT or the next app for people to use. We use whatever we need for our research. We make it publicly available, and whoever wants to use it can then do so. And of course, the World Wide Web, or the internet as we now call it, is the best example. When in the year 1989, one of our scientists, Tim Berners-Lee, thought, how do I get my data from one computer to the other? And the internet, the connection already existed, but there was no way of sharing the data. So he invented the web, and he invented the language HTML in doing so. And then we used the web. And we published it, and people said, hey, that's very nice and very smart. We will also use it. And suddenly the web became the World Wide Web. And so that's exactly the same thing that we do at CERN. We develop everything for us. We want to advance and push forward the frontier of research. And in doing so, chances are that we develop something that people in the world find meaningful and useful, such as the web, or maybe even the touchscreen, if I can just mention that. The touchscreen was really invented at CERN as well, not so that we can now swipe left and right, but for our control rooms. And then, of course, people looked at it and said, hey, that's very nice. And now we can go left and right and look at cats on the internet.
And there's something beautiful about the humbleness of an organization that creates these, like, just think the World Wide Web or the touchscreen, these amazing inventions. And I love the humbleness. I say, hey, we got this. It's pretty cool. It's out there if you want to use it. And I just love that. And I just think that's something that we don't have enough in the world, is that kind of feeling of open source and saying that we found something, it's really useful for us, and maybe it'll be useful for you too. Really, that's just a fantastic philosophy. Definitely not what we have enough of in the world around us. I assume then you guys do you not use ChatGPT and Bard and Anthropic, or you do, but you're also kind of focused on your own tools?
So of course, for our main analysis, we really have our own framework. So this is not something that where we would use ChatGPT. Having said that, of course, we are definitely using it. Maybe just on the very boring side for writing emails. I'm afraid I have received several emails already that ChatGPT has sent to me, and then I might have asked ChatGPT to provide an answer to this email, maybe. So that, of course, I think happens. We have seen some really nice progress on the education part of it, where, for example, at CERN and with all the institutes that take part at CERN, we have developed a so-called master class of particle physics project. It's been long-standing. It originated in the US. It's a really cool thing where high school students can become particle physicists for one day. So they get a crash course in particle physics, and then they can really analyze real data, and they really get shown how it works, and at the end they get to combine all the data to see if they found something in this data set. And so of course this is quite a steep learning curve if students want to do it within one day, but this program is now very nicely established, and we can also of course add links to it so that everyone who is listening now can check it out. But of course here, for example, ChatGPT or any other large language learning model is fantastic in advancing and accelerating this process, because instead of explaining something to students, we can just tell them, here, use this prompt. The ChatGPT will give you a small code that you can then add, for example, in a Jupyter notebook, which is just, a very helpful, very resourceful tool to then run an analysis, which would take a long time to explain. And nowadays we can just tell them, hey, you have your friend here, let's call them ChatGPT, and together with this friend, you can now do your analysis. And once you've done that, we can now discuss what just happened. So I think this is really something that I've seen some colleagues at CERN already doing. And of course, I personally am so excited for this whole thing, because we all see, I think, the benefits and all the risks. So I think we are. It's such a great time to experience such a huge paradigm shift. And I see the challenges for physics education researchers or science education researchers. I see it for teachers who I think are desperately looking for maybe some suggestions and help. And and I'm not telling you any secrets. Your last episode here on this podcast, you had a really, really nice discussion and also some very nice resources. But I think we are still not even close to understanding where this whole AI and AI-supported education will even lead us. So I'm personally very, very excited for that. And I'm curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think, absolutely. What's interesting is the very beginning of the podcast, you said when you get your teachers for the week, apart from eating fondue, which I just love, they said they were all talking about AI. Have you noticed over the time that you've done this, there are themes that come up, and right now AI is kind of what's at the end of their tongue? Have you noticed changes maybe? And is lately AI is what everybody's thinking about, or is that just a passing phase?
That's a very good question. I mean, if I look over the past, let's say, 10 years or so, there were certain themes that were always discussed. And I think the past 2 years, AI was the topic. But I think within AI, the focus has now shifted. I think at the beginning, we really had a lot of teachers, and of course, I have a lot of sympathy for their positions, who were really worried by how do we now assess students? Can I even give them some writing prompts knowing that ChatGPT can solve that for them? And so I think this is a struggle that is ongoing. How do we now assess students in the world of ChatGPT? But I think now the topic has shifted a little bit. When we go out for cheese fondue and we discuss AI, a lot of sharing of best practices happens, which is exactly what we want. So a lot of teachers, maybe not all of them, have tried out certain AI tools in the classroom. They might have already thought and discussed, how do we prepare students to prompt to generate nice prompts, and also how do we get students ready to discern if something is credible or not, which I think is the biggest challenge ever. Because yes, ChatGPT and all the other tools, they can produce beautiful material and results immediately, but figuring out if it's correct or not, or if it's useful or not, that of course is still very, very much valid. And I think this is the discussion that we, at least here at CERN in our teacher programs, really have a lot. We hear it a lot from teachers, because we are still at the beginning. And so I think it has shifted. At the beginning, there was a bit of a shock. And now we are really starting to figure out what works well, what do students need to know in order to maximize it, because it's here now, and teachers really have to react. I think it's beautiful, because we have so many, advancements in science. We have so many things that happen, but they are never as acute as this one. This one is now going on. Our students are using it, so teachers know, I have to react. There's no, I can wait another year. No, they really have to react now, and I have a lot of sympathy for that. I find it fascinating, and of course, I'm very, very grateful that we still have teachers who are up for this challenge. I mean, let alone after a pandemic. I'm not sure if I was still a teacher. I really salute everyone who's still a teacher. I think this is amazing if you're still teaching after 2 and 3 years of distant remote teaching. But now, coming out of Corona, the next challenge is around the corner, which I think is an even more demanding challenge. So I'm very grateful that we have amazing teachers around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And It's interesting how you're describing this shift. At first, there was the fear about assessment, and now it's more sharing of practice and taking this opportunity. But I think you said something that's really important, Jeff. You said that it's really, you can't wait till next year. You know, it's just so accelerated. I mean, every time I get a bunch of newsletters, and every time I read them, I'm like, did that just happen yesterday? I mean,
Yeah, true.
I don't know, Dan. What are you feeling like things are just moving too fast?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been so busy recently, but I don't always have time to check in, and then I'll check in after a week or two, and there's like a million new things. Yeah, so definitely.
Yeah, and I think, it's wonderful to hear that teachers, as you described, are really focused on that and being in the now and really saying, okay, I can't wait till next year. Jeff, this has been so rich, and we so appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and are you in the midst of hosting teachers this week?
I'm actually not. It's one of the rare weeks where I can, not necessarily relax, but I can prepare all the programs that will follow in the next coming weeks. But of course, now April and May is the time of the year where teachers have a hard time getting time off from their teaching duties. So that's usually where we have a little bit of a downtime.
Okay.
But as of May, I will have one group of teachers coming in every week, and I'm very excited. But I really want to thank you for the invitation. I really, really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for having me. And I hope
Yeah.
our listeners and viewers can take something away from it. And of course, I can just extend our invitation again for every teacher who is listening. The website teachers.cern is in the show notes already, so you can click on it and figure out if there's a teacher program at CERN that might interest you, and then please submit your application. And if you just want to visit CERN, you can also do that every day except for Mondays when we are closed for visitors.
Yeah, and I definitely, if you get a chance to visit CERN, it's kind of mind-boggling. It's quite amazing. Jeff, we just would like you, we have school leaders and educators that listen to us. Is there any parting guidance or anything you would like them to think about, or anything you want them to walk away about regarding science, gender, and just being in the now with change?
Well,
I'm putting you on the spot, sorry.
I love it. I love it. Absolutely. There are many things. I'm just thinking what would be the main outcome or the main message. I think first of all, everyone who is teaching and who is an educator, we really, really thank you, and we really need you. So that's already step number one. So thank you for that. But of course, we have to be aware that we have to motivate all our students, irrespective of their interest, irrespective of their gender, of whatever metric we want to use. And so for that, of course, we have to make it interesting. I feel like any education that is boring is really, really a disservice to our society. So I think making it engaging and interesting, however way that is, because teaching is a very personal endeavor, so every teacher will have their own way of doing it, but making it interesting and engaging. And so here, of course, there are various strategies making it interesting by showing real-world examples, showing role models, embedding boring content in an interesting context. So that is one trick that we know. If you have to teach something, embedding it in the context will automatically increase your chances of reaching more students, because of course you can, for example, just talk about a mechanic pump and how it works, or you discuss the heart, for example, as a mechanic pump, as an example for it, and suddenly you might reach more students. So I think to be really honest, everyone who's listening in already, you are our rock stars already. So I don't think we can really tell you more, but keep doing what you're doing and motivate the next generation of scientists.
I love that you call our audience of teachers rock stars, because I can't agree more. They deserve a lot, and it's not always easy. So thank you for really highlighting the audience that we have of educators around the world that are rock stars. So thank you. I want to remind our audience that the show notes, Jeff has been very generous and put show notes in. Dan, anything that you want to share or wrap up before we move on?
No, I've been mostly listening on this one. I've learned a lot from Jeff, so thanks for coming. It was super interesting for me personally, which is the best podcast. If it's something that's interesting to me, it's usually interesting to people listening. So.
Yes. And thank you, Jeff, again. And thank you to our audience. We look forward to catching up with you next time. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.